The river ran fast that evening, swollen from days of heavy rain. The sky, a dull shade of grey, reflected in the rippling currents, and the distant rumble of thunder hinted at another storm brewing. On the riverbank, a lone figure walked, his steps slow and hesitant, as if burdened by the weight of a past he could not escape. Ethan Carter had always found solace in solitude. A former journalist turned recluse, he had spent the last 5 years in this small town, seeking refuge from the chaos of his past. His days were predictable: early morning walks, afternoons spent reading, and evenings lost in the pages of his unfinished novel. But that night, fate had other plans. As he reached the old wooden bridge, something unusual caught his eye. A stray dog standing near the water's edge, its fur damp and matted. The dog had something in its mouth, clamped between its teeth, as if it had just fished it from the river. Ethan's curiosity piqued when he noticed that it wasn't a stick or a piece of trash. It was a book, a diary, its leather cover soaked and torn at the edges. The dog's eyes met his, filled with a strange intelligence, as if urging him to take it. Slowly, Ethan knelt down, extending his hand. The dog hesitated for a moment before dropping the diary into his grasp. As his fingers closed around the worn leather, he felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. Opening the diary, he found pages smeared with water, ink running in some places yet still legible. And as he read the first few lines, his breath caught in his throat. "If you are reading this, it means I didn't make it, but the truth must come out. Please, whoever you are, don't let this be forgotten." The words sent a shiver down his spine. Ethan flipped through the pages, his heart pounding. The entries were desperate, filled with fear, detailing events that suggested something sinister had happened. But who had written it? And why had the diary ended up in the river? The stray dog watched him, tail wagging slightly, as if waiting for him to understand. Ethan glanced around, the night suddenly feeling heavier. He had spent years running from stories, but this one had found him. And somehow he knew this diary was more than just forgotten words on a page. It was a message from the past, waiting to be uncovered. The town of Willowbrook was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Tucked away in the valley, surrounded by endless forests and winding rivers, it was the perfect escape for those who sought peace, or, in Ethan's case, a place to disappear. 5 years ago, he had been one of the most respected investigative journalists in the city. But one story had changed everything. He had uncovered a government scandal, one that had put powerful people in danger, and in return, he had been silenced, his career ruined, his reputation destroyed. When threats became too real, he had left everything behind. Now, he lived in a small cabin by the river, away from the world. His only companion was his old typewriter and an unfinished manuscript he couldn't bring himself to complete. But despite his efforts to stay hidden, the fire of a journalist still burned inside him. The morning after finding the diary, Ethan sat at his desk, flipping through the pages once more. The handwriting was neat, yet hurried, the words filled with urgency. The author, whoever they were, had feared for their life. The more he read, the more uneasy he felt. There were mentions of names he didn't recognize, warnings about something being hidden, and the phrase, "They know what I found," repeated multiple times. Ethan's instincts told him this wasn't just a random lost diary. This was a cry for help. A voice silenced by something bigger. He glanced at the stray dog, now curled up in the corner of his cabin. It had followed him home the night before and refused to leave. Ethan wasn't used to companionship, but there was something about the dog's quiet loyalty that made him reconsider. Sighing, he ran a hand through his hair. He had promised himself he was done chasing dangerous stories. But this felt different. He needed to know who wrote this diary and why they had disappeared. And deep down, he knew This was the beginning of something he couldn't walk away from. It started with a name. Ethan spent the next few days deciphering the diary, piecing together fragments of a life lost to the river. The author had mentioned someone LM, a set of initials written multiple times, always followed by cryptic warnings. Whoever they were, they had uncovered something dangerous. Then came the final entry, hastily scrawled as if written in fear. If anything happens to me, look for the truth where the river meets the past. Ethan frowned. What did that mean? He knew the river well, but this phrase felt symbolic. Was there something hidden near the river? Determined, he set out to investigate. With the stray dog trailing beside him, he followed the riverbank, searching for clues. The air was crisp, the water still, but something about the silence felt unnerving. Then he saw it. Half buried in the mud near the river's bend, something metallic gleamed under the sunlight. Ethan's pulse quickened as he knelt down, brushing away the dirt. It was an old locket, rusted but intact. Opening it, he found a photograph inside, an image of a young woman with sad eyes. On the back, a name was etched in faded ink. Lillian Montgomery. The initials matched. Heart-pounding, Ethan raced back to his cabin, the diary clutched in his hands. He scoured the internet, searching for any mention of Lillian Montgomery. What he found sent chills down his spine. Lillian had disappeared 10 years ago. Official reports claimed she had drowned in the river, an accident. But the diary suggested otherwise. If she had written this, then someone had wanted her silenced. And they had succeeded. But why? Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. He had uncovered forgotten stories before, but this was personal. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase Lillian's truth, and now, thanks to a stray dog and a lost diary, that truth was resurfacing. The sound of footsteps outside startled him. The dog lifted its head, ears perked. Ethan's gut tightened. No one ever visited him. He moved cautiously to the window, peering outside. A black SUV sat at the end of the dirt road, its engine running. Someone was watching him. And that's when he realized they knew he had the diary. Introduction of the unlikely savior. 2,500 words. Ethan's breath hitched as he stood frozen by the window, staring at the black SUV. The vehicle idled at the far end of the dirt road, its tinted windows, concealing whoever was inside. The town of Willowbrook was small, and visitors were rare. Someone was watching him, someone who knew. A low growl snapped him out of his thoughts. The stray dog, his unexpected companion, had risen to its feet, standing alert near the door. Its fur bristled, ears pinned back, teeth bared. It sensed danger. Ethan swallowed hard. He had two choices: stay inside, pretending he hadn't seen them, or confront the unknown, the way he once had as an investigative journalist. His instincts screamed at him to act. He grabbed the diary and stuffed it into his desk drawer before cautiously stepping outside. The dog followed, its steps eerily in sync with his own. The SUV remained motionless, but he could feel the weight of unseen eyes. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the SUV's engine revved, and it sped away, disappearing down the empty road. Ethan exhaled sharply. He wasn't paranoid. Someone knew he had the diary, and they wanted to make sure he knew it too. He glanced down at the dog, its amber eyes meeting his. "Guess we're in this together, huh?" he murmured. The dog let out a soft chuff, as if in agreement, before nudging his hand with its wet nose. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had spent years avoiding trouble, yet here it was, landing at his doorstep in the form of a waterlogged diary and a stray dog that refused to leave his side. Later that evening, as he sat by the fireplace, flipping through the pages of the diary again, he realized something strange. The dog had found the diary in the river, but why had it retrieved it, and why had it brought it straight to him? It wasn't just coincidence. This dog was more than a stray. It had a purpose. Ethan reached out, scratching the dog behind its ears. "You knew this was important, didn't you?" The dog thumped its tail against the floor, settling down beside him with a content sigh. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone, and he had the sinking suspicion that this dog, this unlikely savior, was going to change everything. The next few days were a blur of unease. The diary had left Ethan with more questions than answers, and the SUV's ominous presence only fueled his paranoia. Someone didn't want this story uncovered. Determined to dig deeper, he visited the town's historical archives, searching for any mention of Lillian Montgomery. The librarian, Mrs. Hendricks, was hesitant at first, but eventually handed him a folder with old newspaper clippings. As Ethan skimmed the articles, his stomach twisted. Lillian Montgomery had been a journalist. She had been investigating the corruption of a powerful corporation that had deep ties to the town. Her last known article hinted at a secret she had uncovered, one that never saw the light of day. And then she vanished. Official reports claimed she had drowned, but Ethan knew better. Someone had silenced her. And now, years later, her diary had resurfaced. Ethan was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice the presence behind him. "Looking for ghosts, Carter." He turned sharply. Detective Marcus Avery. Avery was one of the few people in town who still spoke to Ethan. He was a man who followed the rules, but he also had a keen sense of justice. Ethan hesitated before nodding. "Maybe?" Avery folded his arms. "I heard you've been asking questions about Lillian Montgomery." Ethan tensed. "Should I be worried?" Avery studied him for a long moment before sighing. "You're not the first person to look into her disappearance, but everyone who did, well, they either left town or stopped asking questions." Ethan's pulse quickened. They had been scared off. Before he could respond, Avery lowered his voice. "Listen to me. If you're digging into this, be careful. Some secrets should stay buried." Ethan clenched his jaw. He had heard those words before, years ago when he had been threatened for exposing the truth. But he wasn't the type to back down. That night, as he walked home with the dog trotting beside him, he noticed something wrong. His cabin door was slightly ajar. Someone had been inside. His chest tightened as he slowly stepped inside. His belongings were untouched, but his desk, a drawer, the one where he had hidden the diary, was wide open. The diary was gone. Panic surged through him. Whoever had taken it now had the evidence. The dog let out a low growl, sniffing the air, and then a knock at the door. Ethan turned, his heart hammering. Had they come back for him? Ethan braced himself as he opened the door, only to find a young woman standing there, her face pale and eyes darting around as if she were being followed. "I need to talk to you," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "Who are you?" She swallowed. "My name is Emily Montgomery. Lillian was my sister." His breath caught. Emily stepped inside, wringing her hands. "I know you have her diary. I've been searching for it for years." Ethan's chest tightened. "It's gone. Someone took it." Emily's face fell, but she quickly recovered. "Then we have a bigger problem." She pulled out a yellowed envelope and handed it to him. Inside was a letter, written in the same handwriting as the diary. "If anything happens to me, trust no one. They will come for the truth. The key is in the river's past." Ethan's mind raced. The river again. It wasn't just where the diary had been found. It was where Lillian had last been seen alive. Emily's voice trembled. "My sister was murdered, and I think I know who did it." Ethan's breath hitched. "Who?" Emily hesitated before whispering, "The mayor." A chill ran down his spine. The mayor of Willowbrook was a powerful man with deep political ties. If Lillian had uncovered something about him, it was no wonder she had been silenced. Ethan clenched his fists. The diary wasn't just a collection of thoughts, it was evidence. and now it was in the hands of someone who wanted it buried forever. Before he could respond, his dog let out a sharp bark, ears alert. Ethan turned to the window and froze. The black SUV was back. This time, they weren't just watching, they were coming for him. The headlights from the black SUV cast long shadows through Ethan's window. The vehicle idled in the darkness, its engine humming like a predator waiting to strike. Emily's face drained of color. They found us. Ethan's mind raced. The diary was gone, but they still saw him as a threat. And now, Emily was in danger. Itu, the dog, stood beside him, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in its throat. It sensed the danger before Ethan even had to process it. "We need to move," he whispered. Emily nodded, gripping the yellowed letter with trembling hands. "I know where we need to go." The river. They slipped out the back door, moving swiftly. Through the trees as the dog led the way, Ethan heard the SUV's doors open, footsteps, voices. "They're gone," a man muttered. "Find them." Ethan and Emily picked up the pace, pushing through the dense foliage. The river's familiar rush grew louder with every step. The dog trotted ahead, pausing only to check on them. Minutes later, they reached the riverbank. The moonlight illuminated the dark, swirling waters. Ethan turned to Emily. "Why here?" Emily's jaw tightened. "My sister's last words. The key is in the river's past. There's something here, something they don't want us to find." The dog barked suddenly, digging furiously at the damp earth near the water's edge. Ethan and Emily exchanged a glance before dropping to their knees, helping uncover whatever was buried. Their fingers scraped against something hard. Metal. Small, rusted lockbox. Ethan yanked it free, his breath coming fast. "This must be it!" Emily's hands shook as she tried to pry it open. "It's locked!" The dog let out a sharp bark. Behind them, the sound of approaching footsteps. "No. Time." Ethan grabbed a rock and smashed the lock. The lid popped open, revealing a stack of documents, a USB drive, and an old cassette tape. Emily gasped as she rifled through the papers. This is it. This is what she was trying to expose. Ethan snatched one of the documents, skimming its contents. It was a confession, signed, dated, proof that the mayor and his associates had been laundering money and orchestrating illegal deals for years. A gunshot rang out. Emily screamed. Ethan pulled her down behind a fallen tree. The dog barked furiously, standing its ground between them and the figures emerging from the darkness. A voice called out, familiar, cold. "Give us the documents, Carter. You don't want to die for this." Detective Marcus Avery. Ethan's stomach dropped. He had warned him. Now he knew why. Avery stepped into the moonlight, gun raised. The mayor stood beside him, expression unreadable. Emily clutched Ethan's arm. "They killed her," she whispered. "They killed my sister." Avery took another step forward. "You should have walked away." The dog let out a low, menacing growl. It was ready to fight. Ethan's mind spun. There was no way out, unless he grabbed the USB drive and in one swift motion threw it into the river. The mayor cursed. Avery's face twisted with rage. Ethan smirked. "Oops." Avery's gun cocked. "You think that's funny?" Ethan's pulse pounded. "You won't find it. And even if you do, you won't be able to erase what's already been uploaded." A flicker of hesitation crossed Avery's face. Ethan doubled down. "That's right. I sent copies. To journalists. To law enforcement outside your reach. By tomorrow morning, the world will know." The mayor's face turned red with fury. "You're lying." A muscle twitched in Avery's jaw. He wasn't sure, and that doubt was their only chance. A distant siren wailed in the night. The dog barked sharply. Reinforcements. Avery swore under his breath. "Let's go." The mayor hesitated, his gaze locked on Ethan, but the sound of approaching sirens sealed his decision. He turned sharply and disappeared into the trees, Avery following close behind. Ethan let out A shaky breath, Emily sobbed, clutching the papers to her chest. "It's over." The dog nudged Ethan's hand, as if reassuring him. They had won. The morning light bathed the town of Willowbrook in a golden glow. News vans lined the streets. Headlines flashed across television screens. Mayor exposed in corruption scandal. Missing journalists' evidence resurfaces years later. Detective under investigation for cover-up. Ethan leaned against the cabin's porch railing, sipping his coffee. They had done it. Emily sat beside him, eyes still puffy from the emotional whirlwind of the past 24 hours. "I still can't believe it's real," Ethan chuckled. "Neither can they." He nodded toward the television, where reporters dissected the scandal. The town's most powerful figures were finally being held accountable. Emily exhaled deeply. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." He shook his head. "You should be thanking him." He nodded toward the dog, who lay at his feet, basking in the sunlight. Emily smiled. "He really did save us, didn't he?" Ethan crouched, scratching. Behind the dog's ears, a stray had brought him a lost diary, and in the end, it had changed everything. The dog thumped its tail. Content, Emily turned to Ethan. "So, what happens now?" He took a deep breath, staring out at the quiet town. For years, he had been running from his past, from his own failures. But now, he had a reason to stay. He looked down at the dog, a grin forming. "Well, first, I don't think I need to give him a name," Emily laughed. "Any ideas?" Ethan rubbed his chin. "How about Justice?" The dog barked as if in approval. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, I think it suits him." For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something he thought he had lost. Purpose. And as the sun rose higher over Willowbrook, he knew this was only the beginning.